The gunshot's echo ripped through the evening air as Lillian Rose stood frozen at the edge of the dusty thoroughfare, her heart seized in her throat. It was supposed to be a simple supply run into town, not the day that would change everything. "Isaac, Isaac," she shouted, watching as the tall figure at the end of the street staggered backward, one hand pressed against his side. Dust swirled around her boots as she ran, the hem of her blue calico dress dragging through the dirt of Cottonwood Creek's Main Street. It was 1875, and the Wyoming territory was as beautiful as it was dangerous. She'd known that when she'd arrived 2 years prior, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Isaac Evans turned toward her, his familiar silhouette backlit by the setting sun. His Stetson hat cast a shadow over his face, but she could still make out his reassuring smile as she approached. "I'm fine, Lily," he said, straightening his posture. "Just a scratch." But Lillian had treated enough injuries at her father's side to know better. The way Isaac's shoulders tensed with each breath, how his left arm hung awkwardly at his side, these were not the signs of a man who was just fine. "Let me see," she demanded, reaching for his jacket. "Not here," Isaac muttered, glancing back down the street where a crowd had begun to gather around the man who'd drawn on him. "Sheriff's coming. We need to get back to your father's place." Lillian nodded, sliding her shoulder beneath his arm to support him. As they turned away from the commotion, she felt something warm and wet seeping through her sleeve. When she looked down, her breath caught blood, so much blood. "You said you'd be fine," she whispered, her voice breaking. Isaac's face had gone pale, his lips pressed into a tight line as he struggled to remain upright. "I am fine," he insisted, but the crimson stains spreading across his shirt told another story entirely. "You're not," she said, her voice stronger now, fueled by fear and determination. "But you will be, I promise." Lillian had known Isaac Evans for barely 3 months, since he'd ridden into Cottonwood Creek looking for work at the nearby ranches. She certainly hadn't planned on falling in love with a cowboy, especially one with eyes that reminded her of thunderstorms, and a past he rarely discussed. But as she helped him toward her father's doctor's office at the edge of town, she realized with startling clarity that losing him was simply not an option. The setting sun painted the wooden buildings of Cottonwood Creek in hues of gold and crimson as Lillian half carried, half dragged Isaac down the street. Every few steps, he would stumble, his weight threatening to pull them both down into the dust. "Just a little farther," she urged, though her slender frame strained beneath his muscular build. At 24, Isaac stood nearly a foot taller than her 20-year-old self, making their awkward progress all the more difficult. "The Caldwell boy," Isaac muttered through gritted teeth. "Didn't think he'd actually draw." "Shush now," Lillian said. "Save your strength." Young Billy Caldwell had been causing trouble for weeks, throwing his weight around town, challenging men to prove himself. Isaac had merely suggested the boy head home to his mother rather than waste more money on whiskey. It should have been a forgettable exchange, not one that ended with gunfire. As they approached her father's combination home and medical office, Lillian called out, Pa, I need help." The door swung open immediately, revealing Dr. Jonathan Rose, his spectacles perched on his nose and sleeves already rolled up from tending to another patient. "Good Lord," he muttered, taking in the sight of Isaac's blood-soaked shirt. "Bring him in, quickly." Together they maneuvered Isaac through the doorway and into the examination room. The space was simple but clean, a wooden table in the center, cabinets filled with medical supplies, and shelves lined with Dr. Rose's medical books brought west from Philadelphia. "What happened, doctor?" Rose asked, already cutting away Isaac's shirt with practiced efficiency. "Billy Caldwell," Lillian explained, hurrying to gather clean bandages and her father's instruments, "drew on him in front of the saloon." Dr. Rose shook his head, his experienced fingers probing the wound on Isaac's side. "Bullet's still in there," he announced grimly. "We'll need to get it out." Isaac's eyes found Lillian's across the room. "Told you it was just a scratch," he said, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace. "A scratch that could kill you if we don't treat it properly," Dr. Rose corrected. "Lillian, prepare the chloroform." As Lillian moved about the room with the efficiency of someone who had assisted her father for years, her mind raced. She and Isaac had shared only a handful of conversations since his arrival in Cottonwood Creek, a dance at the town's spring social. A few quiet words exchanged when he'd come to have a cut on his hand treated after a day of fence mending at the Harrington Ranch. Brief moments where his eyes had lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. Nothing that should have made her heart pound with such fear at the thought of losing him. "Ready, Pa," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Dr. Rose nodded. "Hold on, son. This won't be pleasant, but we'll have you fixed up soon enough." As the chloroform took effect and Isaac's eyes fluttered closed, Lillian caught his hand in hers and squeezed it gently. "Don't you dare die on me, Isaac Evans," she whispered. "Not when we've barely begun. The surgery lasted over an hour, Doctor." Rose worked meticulously to extract the bullet and repair the damage it had caused. Thankfully, the shot had missed Isaac's vital organs, though blood loss remained a serious concern. "He's lucky," Dr. Rose said, wiping his brow with his sleeve as he stepped back from the table. "Another inch to the left and we'd be having a very different conversation." Lillian nodded, her hands steady as she applied the final bandages to Isaac's wound. "Will he recover fully?" Her father studied her face, noting the intensity in her expression. "With proper care, yes. Though he'll need to stay here for at least a week, possibly longer." "I'll look after him," Lillian said without hesitation. Dr. Rose sighed, removing his spectacles to clean them with a handkerchief. "Lillian, I've seen that look before. The Evans boy is a drifter, a cowhand who follows the work. Men like that don't put down roots." "You don't know him," she replied, her chin lifting slightly. "Neither do you, daughter." His voice was gentle but firm. "Just guard your heart, that's all I ask." Before she could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. "Doctor." Rose moved to the window, peering through the fading daylight. "It's Sheriff Collins," he reported, "and he's got young Caldwell in tow." Lillian's expression hardened. "Good, I hope they throw him in jail and lose the key." "I'll speak with them," Dr. Rose said, patting her shoulder. "You stay with our patient." After her father left, Lillian pulled a chair beside Isaac's makeshift bed. His face was peaceful in unconsciousness, the lines of pain temporarily erased. She allowed herself to study him properly, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the dark lashes that rested against his cheeks. "You promised me a ride to see the wildflowers in the North Meadow," she whispered, brushing a lock of dark hair from his forehead. "So you'd better recover, Isaac Evans. I intend to hold you to your word." Outside, she could hear her father's voice mingling with Sheriff Collins's deeper tones. Words like self-defense and witness accounts drifted through the open window. At least Isaac wouldn't face legal troubles, small comfort given his current state. As night fell over Cottonwood Creek, Lillian trimmed the lamp and prepared for a long vigil. She'd sent word to the Harrington Ranch about Isaac's condition, letting them know their newest ranch hand wouldn't be reporting for work anytime soon. "You picked the wrong town to get shot in, cowboy," she murmured, settling into her chair. "Because I'm not letting you go anywhere until you're good as new." The hours crept by, marked only by the ticking of her father's pocket watch on the table and the occasional sounds from the street outside. Twice, Isaac stirred, muttering incoherently before slipping back into deeper sleep. Each time Lillian dampened a cloth and wiped his brow, checking for signs of fever. It was well past midnight when Dr. Rose returned, looking tired but satisfied. "Caldwell's locked up," he reported, "and his father's been summoned from their homestead." From what witnesses say, the boy drew first without provocation. Lillian nodded, unsurprised, and Isaac, completely in the right according to everyone present. Her father studied her with concern. "You should get some rest, Lily. I can sit with him." She shook her head. "I'm not tired." Dr. Rose knew his daughter well enough not to argue. "Very well, wake me if his condition changes. And Lillian," he paused at the door, "remember what I said." After he left, Lillian returned her attention to Isaac, noting with relief that his breathing seemed steadier now. "My father thinks you'll break my heart," she told his sleeping form, "but he doesn't understand. I'm not some silly girl with romantic notions." She straightened his blanket, smoothing it over his chest. I can't explain it. Something about you feels important. Like you're supposed to be here. Outside, an owl hooted, its mournful call drifting through the night. Lillian leaned back in her chair, allowing her eyes to close briefly. Just for a moment, she told herself. She woke with a start to find early morning light streaming through the windows and a pair of gray eyes watching her intently. You stayed, Isaac said, his voice rough from disuse. Lillian straightened, immediately alert. Of course I stayed. How do you feel? Like I've been trampled by a particularly angry bull, he admitted, wincing as he shifted slightly. But alive, thanks to you and your father. She reached for a cup of water, helping him take a few careful sips. You said you were fine. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I didn't want to worry you. Well, that failed spectacularly. She couldn't keep the edge from her voice when I saw all that blood. I'm sorry, he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. Truly? Something in his gaze made her throat tighten. Just don't do it again. Cottonwood Creek has enough graves already. Isaac nodded, then frowned as a thought occurred to him. The Harrington Ranch, I sent word last night. Mr. Harrington said your job will be waiting when you're well enough to return. She adjusted his pillow. Though that won't be for some time yet. I can't impose on you and your father. You're not imposing, she interrupted. This is a doctor's office. Treating patients is what we do. Most patients pay, Isaac pointed out. Lillian stood, smoothing her rumpled skirt. We'll work something out. Perhaps you can repair that leaky roof Pa's been complaining about once you're back on your feet. Before he could argue further, Dr. Rose entered, looking pleased to find his patient awake and coherent. Good morning, Mr. Evans. I'm glad to see you've rejoined the land of the living. He moved to examine the bandages. Any pain? Nothing I can't handle, Isaac replied, though his sharp intake of breath as the doctor probed the wound suggested otherwise. Brave words, but let's not test them unnecessarily. Dr. Rose reached for a bottle on the shelf. Lillian will give you laudanum for the pain, just enough to take the edge off. Too much will slow your recovery. As her father continued his examination, Lillian excused herself to prepare breakfast. In the kitchen, she allowed herself a moment of relief. Isaac was awake, alert. The worst danger had passed. She was stirring a pot of oatmeal when Dr. Rose joined her. His constitution is strong, he said, washing his hands at the basin. If infection doesn't set in, he should recover well. Thank goodness, Lillian murmured. Her father dried his hands, studying her face. Sheriff Collins will want to take his statement today, and apparently young Caldwell's father arrived in town at dawn, making quite a scene at the jail. Lillian's expression darkened. That family has caused nothing but trouble since they moved here. True, but they have powerful connections in Cheyenne. Dr. Rose sighed. Politics, I'm afraid, always complicating matters. After breakfast, which Isaac managed to eat a few spoonfuls of despite his protestations that he wasn't hungry, Sheriff Collins arrived as predicted. He was a barrel-chested man with a graying mustache and eyes that had seen too much violence over his years wearing the badge. Mr. Evans, he greeted, removing his hat as he entered the sick room. Good to see you pulling through. Isaac nodded, shifting to a more upright position with Lillian's help. Sheriff, need to ask you about yesterday's events if you're up to it. Collins pulled out a small notebook. Just to make everything official like. Isaac's account matched what witnesses had already reported. He'd been leaving the Mercantile when Billy Caldwell, 3 sheets to the wind despite the early hour, had called him out for supposedly making eyes at a girl Billy fancied. I told him he was mistaken and suggested he head home to sleep it off, Isaac explained. That's when he called me a coward and drew his pistol. But you drew faster, Collins noted. I didn't have much choice, Sheriff. Isaac's expression was grim. Though I aimed to wound, not kill, Collins nodded, jotting down notes. That matches what folks saw. Problem is, Horace Caldwell's raising hell, saying you provoked his boy deliberately. That's ridiculous, Lillian interjected from her position by the window. The sheriff gave her a sympathetic look. I know that, Miss Rose. But Caldwell's threatening to bring charges in Cheyenne if I don't hold Mr. Evans here. On what grounds? Dr. Rose demanded, entering the room with fresh bandages. Every witness says it was self-defense. On the grounds that his brother-in-law is Judge Wilson Tanner, Collins replied heavily, and Tanner's no friend to drifters or cowboys. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Judge Tanner was known throughout the territory for his harsh sentences and particular disdain for men who worked the ranges rather than settling permanently. "So what happens now?" Isaac finally asked. Collins tucked away his notebook. "For the moment, nothing. You're in no condition to travel, and I've told Caldwell as much, but once you're healed up—" He shrugged. "Might be wise to consider moving on." After the sheriff left, a heavy silence hung over the room. Lillian busied herself changing Isaac's bandages, her movements quick and precise despite the anger she felt. "It's not right," she said finally. "You defended yourself, everyone knows it." "Justice and the law aren't always the same thing, Lily," Isaac replied quietly. "I've learned that the hard way." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" For a moment, something dark flickered in his eyes, a shadow from a past he rarely mentioned. Then he shook his head. "Nothing important, just an observation." Before she could press further, a wave of pain crossed his face and he leaned back against the pillows, suddenly pale. "You need to rest," Lillian said, setting aside her questions for now. "Sheriff Collins and the Caldwells can wait." Isaac caught her hand as she rose to leave. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter traitorously. "Just doing my job," she replied, gently extracting her fingers from his grasp. "Get some sleep." The next several days fell into a rhythm. Isaac grew stronger, the wound beginning to heal without signs of infection. Lillian tended to him between helping her father with other patients, bringing him books from her small collection, and keeping him apprised of town gossip. They talked more than they ever had before about everything and nothing. She learned he'd grown up in Missouri, that he had a younger sister somewhere in California, that he could recite surprising amounts of Shakespeare from a dog-eared volume his mother had insisted he take when he left home at 17. In turn, she told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother's death from influenza when she was 12, about her father's decision to move west after the war, believing his medical skills would be more valued on the frontier. What remained unspoken were the glances that lingered too long, the way their hands sometimes brushed when she passed him a cup of water, the charged silence that occasionally fell between them like a tangible thing. On the 5th day after the shooting, Dr. Rose declared Isaac well enough to sit outside for short periods. Lillian helped him to a chair on the small porch that faced the garden behind the house rather than the main street, offering him privacy from curious townsfolk. "This is heaven," Isaac sighed, tilting his face toward the warm June sunshine. "I was starting to forget what fresh air smelled like." Lillian smiled, settling into the chair beside him with her mending. "Pa says you're healing remarkably well. Another week and you might be ready for light duties." "A week," he echoed, his expression turning pensive. "Sheriff Collins came by yesterday while you were at the mercantile." Her needle paused mid-stitch. "And Judge Tanner arrives in 3 days," Isaac said quietly. "Horace Caldwell's formal complaint has been filed." The news shouldn't have surprised her, yet it hit like a physical blow. "What will you do?" Isaac gazed out at the wildflowers dotting the small garden. "What the sheriff suggested, I suppose. Move on." "But you've done nothing wrong," Lillian protested. "If you just explain, explanations won't matter," he interrupted gently. "Not to a man like Tanner. I've seen his kind before. Once they decide what you are, no amount of truth will change their mind." She set her mending aside, suddenly unable to concentrate on the tiny stitches. "So you'll run." Just like that, something flashed in his eyes, not anger, but a deep, tired resignation that was somehow worse. "I'm not running, Lily, I'm surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" She stood abruptly, needing to move, to do something with the frustration building inside her. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks the same." Isaac winced as he shifted in his chair, one hand going to his bandaged side. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," she challenged. "Because the man I've come to know these past days doesn't strike me as someone who backs down from a fight." There are different kinds of fights, he said quietly. Some can't be won with courage alone. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Matthew Harrington, Isaac's employer. The rancher was a weathered man in his 50s, his face tanned from decades under the Wyoming sun. "Evans," he greeted with a nod. "Good to see you vertical." "Mr. Harrington," Isaac replied, straightening in his chair despite the pain it clearly caused him. "What brings you to town?" The rancher removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a gesture Lillian recognized as hesitation. "Heard about your trouble with the Caldwells and Judge Tanner." "News travels fast," Isaac observed dryly. "Small town," Harrington agreed. "Wanted to let you know I've sent a wire to a friend in Cheyenne. Former Army colonel, now practices law, thought he might be able to help with your situation." The unexpected support seemed to catch Isaac off guard. "That's very generous of you, sir, but I wouldn't want to cause trouble for you or your ranch." Harrington waved away the concern. "Caldwells are bad news, everyone knows it. Besides, good ranch hands are hard to come by. Be ashamed to lose you just when you were getting the hang of things." After the rancher left, promising to return when he heard back from his legal friend, Lillian studied Isaac's face. "You see," she said softly, "you're not alone here." Isaac didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on something distant. Finally, he sighed. "It's been a long time since I stayed anywhere long enough to not be alone." The admission, simple as it was, felt like a gift, a small glimpse behind the careful guard he maintained. Lillian reached across the space between their chairs, offering her hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "Maybe it's time that changed," she suggested, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he must hear it. The look he gave her then, equal parts hope and fear, made her breath catch. But before he could reply, "Doctor." Rose called from inside, needing Lillian's assistance with a patient who'd just arrived. "I should go," she said reluctantly, pulling her hand away. Isaac nodded, his expression unreadable once more. "Of course." As she hurried inside, Lillian couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened between them, something fragile that could either grow stronger or shatter completely in the days to come. The patient requiring attention was 8-year-old Tommy Jenkins, who'd fallen from a tree and broken his arm. As Lillian assisted her father in setting the bone, her mind kept drifting back to Isaac sitting alone on the porch, to the warmth of his hand in hers, to the shadow of his past that he kept so carefully hidden. "Wool gathering, Lillian?" Her father asked gently as they finished bandaging Tommy's splinted arm. She blinked, refocusing. "Sorry, Pa." After the boy left with his relieved mother and a peppermint stick for his bravery, Dr. Rose fixed his daughter with a knowing look. "I've seen how you look at him," he said without preamble, "and how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching." Heat rose in Lillian's cheeks. "I don't know what you mean," her father's expression softened. "I'm not blind, Lily, nor am I unsympathetic. Isaac Evans seems a decent man despite his unsettled circumstances." "But," she prompted, hearing the reservation in his tone, "but I worry about what happens if he leaves," Dr. Rose said honestly. "I've watched you these past days. You care for him deeply, perhaps more than you realize." Lillian busied herself cleaning instruments, avoiding her father's perceptive gaze. "I care for all our patients." Dr. Rose's gentle laugh held no mockery. "If you say so, daughter, just be careful with your heart, that's all I ask." That evening, as twilight painted the western sky in shades of lavender and gold, Lillian brought Isaac his dinner on the porch where he'd remained most of the day, reluctant to return to the confines of the sick room. "Your father tells me I can try walking to the garden gate and back tomorrow," he said as she set the tray before him. "Seems I'm making progress." "You are," she agreed, settling into the chair beside him, "though you shouldn't rush things." He took a bite of stew, chewing thoughtfully before asking, "Have you lived in Cottonwood Creek since you came west?" Lillian nodded. "Pa wanted to settle somewhere he was needed. The town had no doctor, then people had to travel 30 miles to Riverdale for medical care." "And you? Did you want to come west too?" The question gave her pause. No one had asked her that before, not even her father. "I didn't have much choice," she admitted. I was 17 and Pa was all the family I had left, but yes, I think I did want it. Philadelphia held too many memories after Ma died. Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. Fresh starts can be healing. Is that what brought you here? She asked carefully. Seeking a fresh start, for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his spoon and turned to face her fully. Partly, he said. And partly just following work. After the war, I drifted. Cattle drives in Texas, mining in Colorado, logging in Oregon, never stayed anywhere long. Why not? He shrugged, then winced at the movement. Never found a reason to, I suppose. The simple statement hung between them in the gathering dusk. Lillian wanted to ask if he might find such a reason in Cottonwood Creek with her, but the words caught in her throat, too bold and too vulnerable to voice aloud. Instead, she asked, "Will you tell me what happened? Before, I mean." What you were running from? Isaac's expression closed, the openness of a moment ago vanishing like a door slammed shut. Some ghosts are better left buried, Lily. Not if they keep haunting you, she countered softly. He stared out at the darkening garden, silent for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Finally, he sighed. I killed a man, he said, his voice so low she barely heard it. Not in the war after, he was my friend once before. He trailed off, shaking his head. It was justified self-defense, like with Caldwell, but his family had connections, a judge not unlike Tanner. There was a trial and I was acquitted, but the verdict didn't matter. In their eyes, I was guilty, so I left. And I kept leaving every time their shadows got too close. Lillian absorbed his words, understanding at last the wariness that lived behind his eyes. And you think they've found you again? Here? No, he said, surprising her. This trouble with the Caldwells is different, just bad luck, but it reminds me why I don't stay in one place too long. Why I can't. The finality in his voice cut deeper than she expected. You mean won't, she said, not can't. Isaac finally looked at her, his expression a complex mixture of regret and something warmer, more dangerous. Maybe they're the same thing. They're not, she insisted. And you don't have to face this alone, Isaac. Mr. Harrington is trying to help. The sheriff knows the truth. And she stopped, suddenly uncertain. You what? He prompted gently, gathering her courage. Lillian met his gaze. I believe in you. I believe you're a good man who deserves a chance at something more than just surviving. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Isaac reached for her hand, his touch sending a jolt through her entire body. Lillian Rose, he said, her name like a caress on his lips. You make me wish for things I gave up hoping for a long time ago. Before she could respond, the front door opened and Dr. Rose stepped onto the porch. If he noticed their hastily separated hands or the flush in his daughter's cheeks, he gave no sign. Beautiful evening, he commented, lighting his pipe, though the clouds to the west suggest rain tomorrow. The moment broken, Lillian rose to collect Isaac's empty dishes. I should prepare for bed, it's been a long day. As she turned to go, Isaac caught her gaze one last time, something like a promise in his eyes. Whatever had begun between them wasn't finished, merely interrupted. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Lillian found sleep elusive. Her mind kept returning to Isaac's confession, to the feel of his hand holding hers, to the way he'd looked at her as if she were something precious and unexpected. She'd known him barely 2 weeks less, if she counted only the days since the shooting. It was madness to feel this way, this connection that defied rational explanation. Yet there it was, undeniable as the sunrise. Outside, the promised rain began to fall, a gentle patter against the roof that usually lulled her to sleep. Tonight, however, it only made her more restless, like nature itself was unsettled. A sudden crack of thunder startled her fully awake. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating her small room, and in that instant, Lillian made a decision. Whatever happened with Judge Tanner, with the Caldwells, with Isaac's mysterious past, she would stand by him. Not because she was naive or romantic, but because something deep inside told her he was worth fighting for. The storm raged through the night, finally abating near dawn. Lillian rose early, her mind clearer despite her lack of sleep. She dressed quickly and moved to the kitchen to start breakfast, surprised to find her father already there, a telegram in his hand. From Matthew Harrington's lawyer friend in Cheyenne, Dr. Rose explained, passing it to her. Arrived late last night. Lillian scanned the message, her heart lifting with each word. The lawyer believed he could help Isaac's case by proving a pattern of harassment by the Caldwell family against other residents. Several similar incidents had been documented in Riverdale before they moved to Cottonwood Creek, and the territorial governor was already aware of Judge Tanner's questionable objectivity where his brother-in-law was concerned. "This is wonderful news," she breathed. "Indeed," her father agreed. "Though not without risk, going against men like Caldwell and Tanner will make enemies." "Some things are worth the risk," Lillian replied, thinking of Isaac's face in the twilight of his confession and the vulnerability behind it. Dr. Rose studied his daughter for a long moment. "You're in love with him," he said. It wasn't a question. Lillian didn't deny it. "I know it seems sudden." "The heart has its own timepiece," her father said, surprising her with his acceptance. "Your mother and I knew after 1 week together." He smiled faintly at the memory. "My colleagues thought I was mad, proposing so quickly." "You never told me that," Lillian said softly. "Perhaps I should have." He took the telegram back, folding it carefully. "Life out here is precarious, Lily. We see that in my practice every day. When you find something that brings you joy, you hold onto it with both hands." The unexpected blessing in her father's words brought tears to her eyes. "Even if it's a drifter with a complicated past, even then," he confirmed. "Though I'd prefer he settle down before you make any permanent arrangements." Lillian laughed, wiping away a stray tear. "Let's get through the next few days first." After breakfast, she took the telegram to Isaac, who had insisted on dressing properly despite his injury. She found him seated in the small parlor, looking pale but determined in a clean shirt borrowed from her father. "Mr. Harrington just left," he told her as she entered. "Judge Tanner arrives tomorrow." "I know," she replied, handing him the telegram, "but read this." As Isaac absorbed the message, his expression shifted from surprise to cautious hope. "This could change everything." "It could," she agreed, sitting beside him on the worn sofa, "if you're willing to stay and fight." He looked up from the paper, studying her face. "And if I'm not?" The question stung, but she met his gaze steadily. "Then I'd ask why. Is it because you're afraid of Tanner and Caldwell, or because you're afraid of what might happen if you stay for other reasons?" Isaac set the telegram aside, his movements deliberate. "You don't mince words, do you, Lillian Rose?" "Not when they matter," she replied. A slow smile spread across his face, the first real, unguarded smile she'd seen from him. "It's one of the things I admire about you." He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "Among many." Her heart quickened at his touch, at the warmth in his voice. "You haven't answered my question." "No, I haven't," he acknowledged, "because I'm not entirely sure of the answer myself." His thumb traced small circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. "What I do know is that when I'm with you, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Peace, maybe, or hope." "Is that enough?" she asked softly. "To make you want to stay?" Isaac's free hand moved to her cheek, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It might be," he murmured. "With one condition." "What's that?" His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "That you let me kiss you, just once, so I know what I'd be staying for." Lillian's breath caught in her throat. Instead of answering with words, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered in the press of lips. Then Isaac's hand slid to the nape of her neck, drawing her closer, and the kiss deepened into something more urgent, more certain. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Lillian kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the sensation. "That," Isaac said hoarsely, "is definitely worth fighting for." She opened her eyes to find him watching her with such intensity it made her heart skip. "Then you'll stay." "Face the judge." "I'll stay," he confirmed, "though I can't promise what will happen afterward." It wasn't the complete reassurance she'd hoped for, but it was honest, and for now it was enough. The next morning brought clear skies, and the news that Judge Tanner had arrived on the early stage from Cheyenne, accompanied by Matthew Harrington's lawyer friend, a formidable man named Charles Whitfield, who had indeed once been an Army colonel. Whitfield came to the doctor's house directly from the stage depot, his military bearing evident in his straight posture and clipped speech. "Mr. Evans," he greeted Isaac with a firm handshake. "Matthew speaks highly of you, which carries considerable weight in my estimation." "I appreciate your help, Colonel," Isaac replied, "though I'm not sure what can be done." Whitfield's smile was sharp as a blade. "More than Horace Caldwell and his brother-in-law expect, I assure you." He laid out several documents on the table. "I've been tracking the Caldwells for some time. This isn't the first young man Billy has provoked, nor the first time the judge has intervened inappropriately." Lillian, serving coffee to the men at the parlor table, listened with growing hope as Whitfield detailed his strategy. It seemed the territorial governor had his eye on Judge Tanner already, concerned about reports of favoritism and possibly even bribery. "Your case provides the perfect opportunity to observe him in action," Whitfield explained. "I've convinced the governor to send an observer ostensibly to evaluate court procedures throughout the territory, but really to watch Tanner specifically." "And if he still rules against me?" Isaac asked pragmatically. "Then we appeal to the territorial Supreme Court," Whitfield said simply. "But I don't think it will come to that. Once Tanner realizes he's being scrutinized, he'll be careful to appear impartial." The hearing was set for the following day at the town hall, which doubled as a courtroom when needed. As Whitfield gathered his papers to leave, he paused, studying Isaac with a shrewd expression. "One more thing, Mr. Evans," he said. "I took the liberty of making some inquiries about your previous legal difficulty in Missouri." Isaac stiffened, his face paling slightly. "I see." "The case was closed. You were acquitted, as you said." Whitfield's voice remained neutral, professional. "However, the family in question still holds influence there. If you're planning to put down roots here, it would be wise to have the matter conclusively resolved." "How?" Isaac asked, an edge of disbelief in his tone. "Some grievances can't be settled with legal papers." "Perhaps not," Whitfield conceded, "but I have connections with the new governor of Missouri. A formal pardon would make it much more difficult for them to pursue any further action against you." After the lawyer left, Isaac sat in stunned silence. Lillian, who had remained in the room during the exchange, moved to his side. "A pardon," she said softly. "That would mean a true fresh start." Isaac looked up at her, a mixture of hope and skepticism in his eyes. "It seems too simple." "Not simple," she corrected, "but possible if you want it." He reached for her hand, drawing her down to sit beside him. "What I want," he said carefully, "is becoming clearer every day." The way he looked at her then, with that mixture of tenderness and barely restrained desire, made her skin flush with heat. Lillian was acutely aware of her father moving about in his office across the hall, the only thing preventing her from throwing caution to the wind and kissing Isaac again. As if reading her thoughts, Isaac smiled, bringing her hand to his lips for a brief, proper kiss that somehow felt more intimate than their earlier embrace. "Tomorrow," he said, "after the hearing, we'll talk about what comes next." The morning of the hearing dawned bright and hot, typical Wyoming summer weather that belied the tension pervading Cottonwood Creek. News had spread that the governor's representative would be present, adding an air of unusual formality to the proceedings. Lillian helped Isaac dress in his best clothes, the same ones he'd been wearing the day he was shot, now cleaned and mended. His wound was healing well, though he still moved gingerly, conscious of the stitches pulling at his side. "You look very handsome," she told him, straightening his collar. "Every inch the respectable rancher." He caught her hands, holding them against his chest. "Hardly a rancher yet, just a hand." "For now," she agreed, smiling up at him, "but a man with your skills could have his own place someday." The implication hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Isaac's eyes darkened with an emotion Lillian was beginning to recognize, a particular intensity that appeared whenever their conversation veered toward the future, toward possibilities. "Lillian," he began, his voice rough with feeling. A knock at the door interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. Dr. Rose entered, followed by Sheriff Collins. "It's time," the sheriff said. "Court's assembling." The town hall was packed when they arrived. It seemed every resident of Cottonwood Creek had turned out to witness the proceedings, along with curious visitors from neighboring homesteads. At the front of the room, Judge Tanner sat at a makeshift bench, his expression severe beneath bushy white eyebrows. Beside him sat a younger man in an expensive suit, the governor's observer, Lillian presumed. Horace Caldwell and his son occupied chairs to the left of the judge's bench, while Colonel Whitfield waited for them on the right. "Remember," Whitfield murmured as Isaac took his place, "speak only when addressed directly by the judge. Let me handle the rest." The hearing began with formal charges being read: assault and battery, with the implication that Isaac had provoked the confrontation deliberately. Murmurs rippled through the crowd at this obvious distortion of events. Whitfield's defense was methodical and devastating. He called witness after witness who had seen Billy Caldwell draw first. He presented documentation of similar incidents in Riverdale. Most damaging of all, he produced an affidavit from a former Caldwell ranch hand describing how Horace had pressured Judge Tanner to rule in his favor in a previous land dispute. Throughout it all, the governor's representative took copious notes, his expression betraying nothing. Judge Tanner grew increasingly uncomfortable, his face reddening as the evidence mounted. When Isaac finally took the stand to give his account, he spoke clearly and honestly, his gaze steady as he described the shooting in simple, factual terms. Lillian, watching from the front row, felt a surge of pride at his composure. "And you've had no previous dealings with the younger Mr. Caldwell?" Judge Tanner asked, his tone suggesting disbelief. "None, Your Honor," Isaac confirmed. "I'd seen him in town but never spoken to him before that day." "Yet he singled you out for this confrontation." Isaac hesitated, then nodded. "He seemed to believe I had shown interest in a young lady he admires. It was a misunderstanding." From his seat, Billy Caldwell glared with undisguised hatred. His father placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering something that made the young man subside, though his expression remained venomous. After both sides presented their cases, Judge Tanner called for a recess to consider his ruling. As the crowd dispersed for a brief break, Lillian made her way to Isaac's side. "You were perfect," she told him, squeezing his arm. "I don't see how the judge could rule against you after all that evidence." "Don't underestimate the power of family ties," Isaac cautioned, though he looked cautiously optimistic. "But I think Whitfield's strategy of bringing in the governor's man was inspired." When court reconvened an hour later, Judge Tanner's demeanor had changed noticeably. Gone was the confident, slightly dismissive air. In its place was a careful neutrality that suggested he knew his actions were being scrutinized. "Having reviewed the evidence presented," he announced, "I find insufficient grounds for the charges against Mr. Isaac Evans. The case is dismissed." A cheer went up from much of the crowd, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Horace Caldwell rose to his feet, his face mottled with anger. "This is an outrage," he shouted. "Wilson, you know damn well—" "Sit down, Mr. Caldwell," Judge Tanner snapped, his eyes flicking nervously toward the governor's representative. "The court has ruled." As Caldwell continued to protest, Sheriff Collins moved to escort him and his son from the building. The younger Caldwell turned as they reached the door, pointing at Isaac. "This isn't over, Evans," he called. "You'd best watch your back." Colonel Whitfield stepped forward, his voice carrying easily across the room. "That sounded remarkably like a threat, Judge. Perhaps Sheriff Collins should take the young man into custody until he cools down." The sheriff nodded, placing a firm hand on Billy Caldwell's shoulder. "Come along, son. I think you need some time in a cell to reconsider your choices." After the Caldwells were removed, the crowd began to disperse, many stopping to congratulate Isaac on the verdict. Matthew Harrington clapped him on the back, careful of his healing wound. "Justice prevailed," the rancher said with satisfaction, "though I reckon the Caldwells will be looking for payback." "Let them," Whitfield interjected, joining their small group. "Any further trouble from that family will only strengthen the governor's case for removing Tanner from the bench." As they spoke, Lillian noticed the governor's representative approaching. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps only in his early 30s, with intelligent eyes and a purposeful stride. "Mr. Evans," he greeted, extending his hand. "Andrew Hollister, representing Governor Thayer." That was quite a display of frontier justice today. Isaac shook the offered hand. "Thank you for your presence, sir. I believe it made a significant difference." Hollister smiled thinly. "The governor is concerned about the fair application of law throughout the territory. Judge Tanner has been problematic in that regard." He glanced toward Whitfield. "Your evidence today will be most helpful in our ongoing assessment." After Hollister departed, promising to recommend formal closure of the case in his report, the group moved outside into the bright afternoon sunlight. The town had taken on a festive atmosphere, the hearing's outcome becoming an impromptu cause for celebration. "I believe this calls for a drink," Harrington announced. "Colonel, Doctor, care to join me at the saloon?" As the men accepted, Lillian caught Isaac's eye, remembering his promise from the day before that after the hearing, they would discuss what came next. "Actually," Isaac said, clearly thinking along the same lines, "if you gentlemen wouldn't mind, I'd like a moment with Miss Rose first." "Perhaps we could join you shortly." Dr. Rose raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Don't overexert yourself, Evans. That wound still needs time to heal." After the others departed, Isaac offered Lillian his arm. "Walk with me." She slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, conscious of curious glances from townsfolk as they strolled toward the quiet end of the main street. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere we can talk privately," he replied, though not so privately as to cause gossip. They ended up on a bench outside the church, a spot visible from the street but removed enough for conversation. For a moment they sat in companionable silence, watching a pair of hawks circle lazily in the summer sky. "So," Lillian finally said, "it's over, you're free." Isaac turned to her, his expression earnest. "Free to leave, you mean, or free to stay?" "Yes," she agreed softly, "that's what I mean." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the delicate bones of her wrist. "Before I was shot, I had no reason to consider staying in Cottonwood Creek beyond the season. It was just another stop, another job." Lillian's heart quickened at his words, at the implication behind them. "And now I have a reason," he said simply, "if she'll have me." The directness of his declaration took her breath away. "Isaac, I know it's sudden," he continued, his words coming faster now as if he feared losing his courage. "I know we've known each other only a short time, but these past weeks, recovering in your home, talking with you, being with you, I've felt more alive, more myself than I have in years." Lillian's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "I feel the same," she whispered. Isaac's face brightened with hope. "Then you'll consider it, a future together." "I don't have much to offer yet, but Matthews offered me a permanent position as his foreman with use of the small cabin on the north edge of his property. It would be a start, a chance to save for our own place someday." "You've thought this through," she said, surprised and touched by the detail in his plans. "I've had little else to think about these past days," he admitted with a wry smile. "Especially after that kiss." Lillian felt her cheeks warm at the memory. "My father would insist on a proper courtship," she warned. "He's progressive in many ways but traditional in others." "I would expect nothing less," Isaac assured her. "I respect your father greatly, both as a doctor and as a man. His blessing would mean everything." As they discussed possibilities, Lillian felt a growing certainty that this was right, that despite the whirlwind nature of their connection, there was something solid and true at its core. It wasn't the girlish infatuation her father had initially feared, but something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits. "There's still the matter of your past in Missouri," she reminded him gently. "If we're to build a life here, that shadow can't follow us." Isaac nodded, his expression turning serious. "I'll take Whitfield up on his offer to pursue a pardon, and Lily." He hesitated, then continued with visible resolve. "I want to tell you everything, about what happened, who I was before. You deserve to know the man you're considering a future with." The offer, so freely given, confirmed what she already believed about his character. "I would like that," she said. "Not because I doubt you, but because I want to know every part of you, past and present." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Then shall we consider ourselves officially courting, Miss Rose?" Lillian's smile was answer enough, but she added for good measure. "We shall, Mr. Evans, though I warn you the gossips of Cottonwood Creek will have a field day with the news." "Let them talk," he replied, his eyes crinkling with happiness. "I've never had anything so worth talking about." As they rose to join the others at the saloon, Lillian felt lighter than she had in years, as if the future, once a vague and uncertain thing, had suddenly come into sharp, promising focus. The next few weeks passed in a pleasant blur. True to Dr. Rose's prediction, Isaac's wound healed well, allowing him to return to light duties at the Harrington Ranch by the end of July. Colonel Whitfield, before returning to Cheyenne, had set in motion the process for Isaac's formal pardon in Missouri, expressing confidence that it would be granted by year's end. The Caldwells, humiliated by the public dismissal of their charges, had retreated to their ranch outside town. Rumors circulated that they were considering selling their property and moving further west, though no one could confirm the gossip. On warm evenings after Isaac finished his day's work, he would ride into town to call on Lillian. Sometimes they would sit on the porch with Dr. Rose, discussing the day's events or debating the latest news from the East. Other times, they would take walks through town or along the creek that gave Cottonwood its name, getting to know each other in the unhurried way of proper courtship. It was during one such walk, as August painted the hills with late summer gold, that Isaac finally shared the full story of his past in Missouri. "Her name was Sarah," he began, as they sat beside the creek watching the sunset. "She was engaged to my friend Thomas Blackfield. We'd all grown up together in the same small town outside Jefferson City." Lillian listened silently as he described how the war had changed Thomas, how he'd returned from fighting with the Confederate forces bitter and angry, prone to violent outbursts fueled by whiskey. "Sarah tried to break the engagement," Isaac continued. "Thomas wouldn't accept it. He began threatening her, following her. Her family came to me for help since I'd known him longest." The familiar pain crossed Isaac's face as he recounted the confrontation that followed, how Thomas had drawn a gun, how the struggle had ended with Thomas dead by his own weapon in Isaac's hands. "The trial cleared me," he finished quietly. "Self-defense, the jury said." But Thomas's family was prominent. His father owned the largest bank in the county, his uncle was a judge. "They made it clear I wouldn't live long if I stayed." Lillian took his hand, holding it tightly in both of hers. "You did what you had to do. You were protecting Sarah." "I know that," Isaac said, meeting her gaze. "In my head I've always known it, but carrying death with you, even justified death, it changes a man." "Is that why you never settled anywhere?" she asked gently. "Because you felt you didn't deserve peace?" The question seemed to surprise him, as if she'd articulated something he'd never fully acknowledged to himself. "Maybe," he admitted, "or maybe I was just waiting to find somewhere that felt like home again." "And have you?" Lillian asked, her heart in her throat. Isaac's smile was slow but certain, the shadows in his eyes receding as he looked at her. "I believe I have." By September, Isaac had moved into the foreman's cabin on the Harrington Ranch, a small but sturdy structure that he spent his free time improving. Lillian helped him choose curtains for the windows and plants for the small garden plot outside, both of them aware that they were preparing the space for a shared future rather than just his temporary residence. Dr. Rose, seeing the seriousness of their intentions, had given his blessing to their courtship with one stipulation. They would wait a full year before discussing marriage to ensure their feelings were based on more than the dramatic circumstances of their meeting. "A reasonable request," Isaac had agreed readily. "I want to be properly established as foreman and to have the Missouri matter fully resolved before asking for your hand officially." Privately, Lillian thought the waiting period unnecessary. She knew her heart as surely as she knew her own name. But she respected her father's wisdom and Isaac's desire to begin their life together on solid footing. As autumn painted the countryside in russet and gold, life in Cottonwood Creek settled into a pleasant rhythm. The Caldwells, as rumored, sold their ranch and departed for California, taking their troublesome influence with them. Judge Tanner, facing an official inquiry from the territorial governor, announced his retirement shortly thereafter. Colonel Whitfield wrote regularly with updates on the pardon process, each letter bringing positive news of progress through the bureaucratic channels of Missouri's state government. On a crisp October afternoon, Lillian rode out to the Harrington Ranch to deliver a package that had arrived for Isaac on the morning stage. She found him mending a section of corral fence, his shirt sleeves rolled up despite the cool air, muscles working smoothly beneath sun-bronzed skin. He looked up at the sound of her horse approaching, his face breaking into the smile that never failed to quicken her pulse. "This is a pleasant surprise," he said, setting aside his hammer and moving to help her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist as he lifted her down, a liberty that would have raised eyebrows in town but felt entirely right between them. "A package came for you," she explained, retrieving it from her saddlebag. "From Missouri, according to the postmark." Isaac took it with curious hands, breaking the seal and unfolding the official-looking document inside. As he read, his expression transformed from curiosity to disbelief to profound relief. "It's the pardon," he said hoarsely, "signed by the governor himself. Full and complete exoneration for any criminal liability in the matter of Thomas Blackfield's death." He looked up at her, eyes bright with emotion. "It's over, Lily, truly over." Without caring who might see, Lillian threw her arms around his neck, holding him tightly as the significance of the moment washed over them both. This wasn't just a legal document, it was freedom from the past, permission to build a future without looking over their shoulders. Isaac buried his face in her hair, his arms strong around her waist. "I never thought this day would come," he murmured. "I'd accepted that I'd always carry it with me." "You still will," she said gently, drawing back to look at him, "but as a memory, not a burden, not something to run from." He nodded, touching her cheek with tender fingers. "I love you, Lillian Rose. I think I have since that first day in your father's surgery when you refused to let me die." Though they had both known it for months, neither had spoken the words aloud until now, honoring the deliberate pace of their courtship. Hearing them made Lillian's heart soar. "I love you too," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. "And I'm not letting you go anywhere." Isaac's laugh was joyous, unburdened in a way she'd never heard before. "I wouldn't dream of it." As the golden afternoon light bathed them in its glow, Lillian realized that the journey that had begun with blood and fear had transformed into something beautiful, a love story written in second chances and hard-won peace. Later that evening, as they sat together on the porch of the foreman's cabin, planning improvements that would turn the modest structure into a proper home, Isaac suddenly grew serious. "Your father asked us to wait a year," he said, taking her hand, "and I respect his wishes. But I want you to know that the moment that year is up, I intend to ask for your hand properly." Lillian smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I might say yes," she teased, "only might." His eyebrow rose in mock offense. "Well, a lady should maintain some mystery," she replied primly, then laughed at his expression. "Of course I'll say yes, you ridiculous man." Isaac's smile was everything she'd ever wanted, open, unguarded, full of promise. "I'll hold you to that, Miss Rose. I'm counting on it, Mr. Evans." As twilight deepened around them, Lillian thought of how far they'd come from that dusty street where a gunshot had changed everything. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led them exactly where they were meant to be together, building a life in this wild, beautiful country that had become home. And when Isaac kissed her beneath the first stars of evening, Lillian knew with absolute certainty that some wounds, even those that seemed fatal at first glance, could heal to reveal something stronger and more beautiful than what had come before. The year of waiting passed more quickly than either of them anticipated, filled with work and planning and the gradual intertwining of their lives. Isaac thrived as foreman of the Harrington Ranch, introducing innovative methods that increased productivity and earned him the respect of the other hands. Lillian continued assisting her father while also preparing for her future role as a rancher's wife, learning about cattle breeding and the business side of running a successful operation. On the anniversary of the day Isaac was shot, he proposed formally, presenting Lillian with a simple but elegant gold band as they stood in the same spot where they'd first acknowledged their feelings for each other beside the creek. They were married 2 weeks later in Cottonwood Creek's white-steepled church, with Dr. Rose giving away the bride and Matthew Harrington standing as Isaac's best man. Colonel Whitfield traveled from Cheyenne for the occasion, bringing news that Judge Tanner had been formally censured by the Territorial Supreme Court and that the governor sent his personal congratulations to the happy couple. After the ceremony, the entire town gathered for a celebration at the Harrington Ranch, with music and dancing continuing well past midnight. When the newlyweds finally rode to the foreman's cabin, now expanded and improved into a proper home, they did so under a shower of flower petals and well wishes. "Mrs. Evans," Isaac said as he carried her across the threshold, "I believe this is the beginning of a remarkable adventure." Lillian smiled up at her husband, her heart full to bursting with love and hope for their future together. "I believe you're right, Mr. Evans, and I can't wait to see where it leads." In the years that followed, their partnership proved as strong in everyday life as it had been in crisis. When Matthew Harrington decided to retire to Denver in 1880, he offered Isaac the opportunity to purchase the ranch on favorable terms, a dream they had scarcely dared to hope might come true so soon. With careful management and hard work, Evans Ranch prospered. Their family grew with the arrival of twins, a boy and a girl, in 1881, followed by another son 2 years later. Dr. Rose eventually passed his medical practice to a younger doctor from the East, moving into a comfortable cottage on the ranch property where he could enjoy his grandchildren while still offering occasional consultations to those who preferred his experienced care. Through it all, Lillian and Isaac never forgot the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, how a moment of violence had ultimately led to a lifetime of love. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the work of the day was done, they would sit together on their porch, watching the stars emerge over the Wyoming plains, and marvel at how completely their lives had transformed since that day when he said he'd be fine, until she saw the blood and knew he wasn't. And in those moments, they were grateful for every step of their journey, even the painful ones that had led them home to each other.